Oh, she's such a bad singer. Oh, she ruined our service on Sunday. I can't get rid of her from my team, though. I know. I'll just mute her. And then she'll be up there on stage and her mic will be muted and nobody will hear her. And she'll get to serve on the worship team still, but she won't be distracting. It's genius.
Genius, genius, genius!
Have you ever had that conversation with yourself before in your head? You have a really bad singer on your team, and it's not just females, it's also males as well. They're a bad singer, and you're like, I don't know how this person got on the team. Wait a second, I'm the team leader and I let them on the team, but I don't know how they got on the team. But they got on the team, and now they are stuck on the team and they can't sing. Do I just mute them on Sunday? Because I definitely don't want to kick them off the team. I get this question so often on my Real Talk episodes, and so I thought I'd make a dedicated video to it. Here's what I would do if I have a singer on my team who cannot sing and should not be on the team. I do not just mute them. Here's what I'd do. First of all, it starts before they get on the team, and I know that this isn't going to be helpful if you already have someone on your team who can't sing, but I'm telling you, put this in place so it doesn't happen in the future, and that is to set expectations and requirements up front. We do not just let anybody join the worship team because they're interested in joining the worship team. That's not how it works. You have to be skilled and gifted, and yes, you don't have to be a professional musician, but there is a minimum threshold that we need for musicians to be at so that they aren't distracting during our service. And this is something that you must make clear up front. Always have an audition for people to join your worship team. Number one, that's going to let you know if they're serious enough or not to actually put in the time to learn one or two songs so that they can audition for the worship team. By the way, they're going to have to do that for the rest of their life on the worship team. I don't know if it's for the rest of their life, but for as long as they're on the worship team, they're going to have to put in the work of learning some new songs. So if they can't even do it for an audition, then they shouldn't be on your worship team, because that comprises most of what a worship team does, is learning how to play the music. But it also lets you know if they are musically gifted enough to serve on the worship team. And like I said, we aren't shooting for perfection. We don't need some professional musician on our team. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, do they meet the minimum threshold? And we need to set the expectations in advance, but maybe you don't know how to communicate the expectations. Don't worry, I've done it for you. I've linked down in the description below my worship team toolkit, which is my code of conduct worship ministry overview, I call it, so it sounds less intimidating, but essentially it's the code of conduct, the expectations that I have for worship team members. I've linked my version of that, my document that I hand out to new worship team members. I've linked it down in the description below. So check out the worship team toolkit down there, and then have an audition process so you can know if people meet that minimum threshold, and if they don't, it's easier to say it to them when they're already unsure whether they're going to be on the team or not than when you've already told them they can be on the team, and you have to be like, for the past 3 years, I really wish that you weren't on the team because you aren't good at singing. That conversation is infinitely harder than, hey, do you want to try out for the worship team and see if it would be a good fit for you? And then you hear them sing and they're not very good. And first of all, I don't usually just tell people no. I usually say not yet. But if it eventually gets to the point of no, then it's easier to say it up front than it is 3 years into the process. Now, let's talk about somebody who's actually on the worship team already and they can't sing. You've already let them onto the worship team. They've been on there for 3 or 4 years, and you've known this entire time that they can't sing. What do? First of all, the thing that you do not do first is say, you're no longer on the worship team anymore. All right, you have made a mistake 4 years ago. Don't blame this person for your mistake. I know it's hard to hear that we make mistakes as leaders sometimes, but sometimes we need to hear that you made a mistake of letting this person on your team. Now we have to deal with it, but we have to do it in a godly and loving way, and that does not just mean, hey, you stink at singing, you have stunk at singing for the past 4 years, you're gone, goodbye. You could say, hey, I've noticed recently that you're flat in a couple parts of songs, and I think that we could work together to improve that and improve your tone, and I would love for us to work on that together so that we can be better equipped, as we're always trying to do, all of us on the worship team, to improve our musicianship. So would you be interested? Let's work together and figure out how we can improve our musicianship together. So it starts there with opening the conversation, and sometimes the easiest way to open the conversation is to listen to recordings of your worship team. If your worship team has never heard themselves lead worship before, then they probably have no idea what they actually sound like, because it's hard for musicians, especially amateur musicians, meaning they aren't professionals, to listen while they're playing. And if they're listening to other people, and they're not listening to themselves most of the time. So take your live stream, which I'm going to say every church has nowadays. Most churches have nowadays. And listen to a recording of it with your team, and you will pick up on so many little things that you can improve that you didn't notice in the moment. But in that process, that singer who can't sing might just realize, oh my goodness, I sound terrible. And they will be embarrassed and want to improve. And that's when you can swoop in and be like, man, let's work on that together. I love that you've identified that. And then you're not even the bad person. You're not the bad guy or the bad girl. You just get to say, I think you're right. I think you were flat on that part of the song. I didn't even notice. Maybe don't lie to them. That's a lie if you say you didn't notice when you didn't notice. But man, let's work on that together. Here are some things that we could try together. And that's the second step. First, we need to identify the problem. Then we need to equip the person to improve and solve the problem. And we work with them because we are the worship team leader, and it is our responsibility to pour into our worship team members musically to build them up to a place where they can lead worship with undistracting excellence. So we go to them and we say, man, here are some great YouTube videos that I found on singing. Let's check those out together because I need to work on my singing too, right? We aren't perfect either. Let's work on those together and just watch one of these videos a week and then talk about it. I love the worship vocalist videos on YouTube. I'll link, I think her name's Charmaine Brown. I'll link her channel down below. So you could say, and let's watch some of these videos and just talk about some of the techniques that are taught in the video. And then through that, the person just might improve their singing to a place where, they probably aren't the best in the world yet, but they're at a place where they can lead in an undistracting manner and participate in serving on the worship team. Now, as you go through this process, one of the most important things is that we need to be clear on the timeline. The most frustrating thing for worship team members when you tell them, I've identified a problem, and especially if you say, let's have you sit out for a couple Sundays till we work on this and get it to the place where it needs to be, is there needs to be clarity in the timeline, or else there is a perpetual, intangible goal that they're trying to reach that they don't know if they're going to reach it. You don't know what the goal is. They don't know how long it's going to take to get there. You don't either. And so it just becomes this arbitrary, you need to improve. We're like, okay, what does that mean? And so you have to define it. So what do you want them to improve? And when are you going to check in with them? It's not just, hey, you need to get to this point before you lead again. It is, hey, we're going to work on this for a month. And in 4 weeks, we're going to come back together and talk about the progress that you've made. That is so much more clear than, man, you need to work on this and you can't lead again until you fix it. And I don't know if I would set that limit of you can't lead with us. It would probably be more like, man, lead with us, but we're checking in a month and we need to improve this. And I can't wait to see your progress as you improve your tone, as you improve your ability to hit notes. This is where we're aiming for, where we aren't flat on notes anymore, where we are singing in a contemporary style instead of a traditional, classical, I should say, style. Whatever the goal is, whatever you're trying to accomplish, make sure that you identify it in a tangible way and provide a clear timeline for when you're going to check in with them so that they don't get frustrated in this perpetual cycle of never-ending improvement that they're trying to reach some goal that they don't even know what the goal is. And I'll say this, most problems can be solved by a teachable heart. So as long as the person has a teachable heart and they're trying to improve, I probably wouldn't kick them off the worship team. If they're really trying, unless it's super distracting. But if somebody's really trying, man, they're going to figure it out eventually. All right, music isn't a mystery. Yes, there is natural giftedness, but honestly, I think everybody can learn how to play an instrument, can learn how to sing in tune if they try and they don't just think they know everything already. I don't know if that's true or not, but this seems true to me. And so, like, everything can be solved by a teachable heart. And so if we just, keep pursuing them, like, let's learn together. Let's learn together. And as long as they're still teachable to your advice, they're still listening to it, they're still implementing it, I don't know if I could, in good conscience, be like, you're never going to get here, so you need to be off the worship team. All right, but we've got to work with them. So work with them. And then I would only kick them off the worship team, honestly, if they were not teachable anymore. And they're prideful, which is honestly the case sometimes in these situations where these people think that they're the best singer in the world, but they're not really, and they aren't willing to identify the problem or work on the problem. Then you're no longer teachable. And then the last step, if they aren't teachable anymore, you have to have the hard conversation and say, I think we still want you to serve in the church, but I just don't think that the worship team is the place that you would be best utilized for the glory of God. And that is our goal, right? To equip the saints for the works of ministry, to help them figure out how God has uniquely gifted them to edify his church. And if we continue to allow somebody to think that the gifts that they have are serving on the worship team when they aren't, then we're lying to them and we are stealing their ability to edify the church in the ways that God has actually gifted them. And I know that that's not an easy conversation, but it is a conversation that we need to have, number one, for that person so that they can figure out what their gifts actually are, but number two, for the health of our church. We can't put the feelings of one person ahead of the edification of our church. If it is a constant distraction, and I'm not just talking about like they sing, I don't know, a couple notes off every once in a while. I'm talking about like, you know what I'm talking about if you're watching this video. They can't sing at all and you feel like you need to mute them. We don't put the feelings of one person above the edification of the other people in our church during our worship services. So what do? We set the expectations and requirements up front so that we don't get in this situation again. For the people who are already on the team, we help them identify the problem by listening to recordings, and then they'll probably identify the problem themselves so that they can't sing. And then what do? We work on the problem together. We don't just leave them on their own and say, you stink at singing, fix it. We help them. We equip them for the work of ministry. Number 4, we have a clear timetable. There's clarity in the process of improvement, and it is not just an arbitrary goal that they might reach someday and they might not ever reach. We check in with them, say, in 4 weeks, we're going to talk about this again. In 4 more weeks, we're going to talk about this again. And then number 5, as long as they have a teachable heart, I really don't think that I would kick them off the team, as long as they are like sincerely trying and applying the advice and the teaching that I give them. But if they no longer have the teachable heart, then they need to find another place to serve. And actually, they need to work on having a teachable heart and humility, probably before they serve in some other public ministry, to be honest. But that's when I would remove them from the worship team, is if they no longer have a teachable heart. So, like I said, the number one thing you need to do is have the expectations up front. That's why I put together the worship team toolkit, which I'll link down in the description below. In that, you will find my worship team code of conduct and my application form that people fill out, which outlines the expectations for them once again. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.